I would say use running as a way to connect with the people in your life and to not ever take them for granted.
Welcome to the Runified podcast, where we come together and talk with runners about their stories. Our hope is that these stories will change the way you think about running and motivate you to live your own story with endurance, strength, and joy. Runified community, welcome to episode 24 of the Runified podcast. It has been amazing to see the growth over the last few weeks in terms of new listeners. If you've been with us for a while, thank you. If you're new to the podcast, I encourage you to go back and listen to previous episodes. Today, we have the pleasure of talking with Chris Sanders, who currently hails from Boston. Chris is an incredible athlete with deep interests in connected health and how technology can enable us not only to understand more about our bodies, but also engage us in our health more, allowing us to prevent diseases rather than waiting to cure them. Chris talks about his running history, how running provides an avenue for him to connect with himself and others, and he also mentions a number of running-related startups that are on the brink of significantly helping runners and athletes of all abilities increase their fitness and health. Speaking of running-related startups, this episode is sponsored by the amazing company Gooder, who I'll talk about later. Enough of me talking. Let's get into our conversation with Chris Sanders. Well, Chris, thanks so much for taking time to join us on the Runified podcast. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing well, getting ready to race in the morning, so have some jitters, but doing well. Great to be here.
Well, yeah, and we'll get into that, I think, a little bit later in terms of what kind of unique race, let's call it, that you'll be competing in. But, you know, we're all about running on this podcast, and can you tell us a little bit about how you personally got into running?
Yeah, so it was, I don't think I started running regularly or seriously until 7th or 8th grade. I had done sports and everything growing up. I played soccer, basketball, but I had gotten to be a bit of a chubby kid, surprisingly, and it had more to do with my diet than anything. So initially it was, just kind of getting back into shape and losing weight. But I went out for the track team my freshman year of high school, and I was immediately pulled in, and I found a group of friends that I really identified with, and that really kind of understood me. Runners are kind of quirky.
And we can agree. I will agree with that.
So I found a group that was really fun to be around, and so I started running.
And, in college and in high school, the distance is relatively short. After college, how did you progress as a runner?
Yeah, so I'm constantly looking for ways to push myself, and I like to do a lot of different things. Running the same race or the same distance even over and over. I mean, it's great from the aspect of your time, pushing yourself and getting a faster time. But for me, it was also about branching out and trying different things as well. So I initially started as a runner, but then got into triathlon. A buddy of mine got me into cycling, and then that led to triathlon. And then that wasn't enough. So later I got into stair racing, and I've kind of done all these different types of races. I kind of need that element of not only just spontaneity, but just having something different, that some different kind of goal that you're pushing yourself towards.
And you said, you like to be able to push yourself besides just trying new things. What has been, in terms of all the races you've done, would you say has been the most challenging running race in particular?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's the Boston Marathon. We were talking about this earlier. It's one, it's hard to get into, and secondly, when you do get into it, there's just so much adrenaline at the beginning of the race when you're going out. The whole first half of the race is pretty much downhill, and the tendency is to go out way too fast, which, of course, I made the classic mistake the first year I did it. You end up blowing up your quads by the time you get into the Newton Hills, and then it's a struggle to finish. So I would say that would be the most difficult race I've done, running-wise, not including triathlon or anything else.
And then triathlon, obviously, was it one of your full Ironman that you would say has been your most challenging?
Yeah. So when I first got into triathlon, I did a sprint and a couple of half Ironman distances. before I actually did my first Ironman branded race, which was Ironman Lake Placid. And for anybody,
that's a tough one, right?
yeah, so anybody that knows triathlon, in the Americas anyway, would say that Ironman Lake Placid is one of the most difficult Ironmans that you could sign up for. And that's really what I was going for. I had just made the decision to go all in. I found something that I love to do, and I wanted to find the most difficult Ironman race to do, and that was it. So definitely Ironman Lake Placid.
Great. And, one of the unique things you mentioned earlier was the stair racing. And that's obviously something a little different. And you mentioned you actually have a race tomorrow. What possessed you to want to race up skyscrapers?
Yeah, so this actually started out as a work thing. I used to work for Millennium, the Takeda Oncology Company, and one of our charity partners was the MMRF, and they're the charity sponsor for the Empire State Building run-up. So I did it for charity the first year, ended up having a fast enough time. The first year I did it was 13 minutes and 5 seconds, up 86 flights of steps. The next year I qualified for the Elite Men's Invitational, so came back and ran with the 25 fastest men in the world. Yeah, so I kind of got sucked into it that way. I found something. I mean, it's not my favorite thing to do, but again, it's something different that mixes things up and pushes your body in a new way.
First of all, that's very unique and amazing. And what are some of the things that inside of you would say keep pushing you to try these new and exciting things?
Yeah, I think I had an immediate fascination with trying to understand my body when I first got into running. I get really excited when it comes to understanding how things work, and particularly the human body. We're incredible machines and what we're capable of, yet we only understand a fraction of our physiology and how we actually work. There's just so much that, just take the human brain, for example. There's so much that we just don't know about it and how it works. And if we were able to somehow understand it, we would be able to control it better. And that's what really excites me, is that there are all these perceived limits on what we can achieve, but yet they're perceptions. The human body is capable of so much more. So take the mental aspects. Even during a race, there are different points when your mind is telling you, like, I can't do this, or you want to give up, but yet your body is still able to go on. It's all about the mental aspects. So that's what really excites me, is just getting your body to push those perceived limits, because again, that's all they are, is perceptions.
I really like what you said there about perceived limits, not limits. We've had people who've literally said before they tried it, I thought a marathon was impossible. Yet something inside them or something externally flipped that switch to say, no, I can do that and I will do that. And guess what? They went ahead and did it. So I really appreciate what you said about the perceived limits of the body.
And like I said, they're hypothetical barriers. Even if you look at the history of our species, there are many points throughout history where you see this, and running in particular. You look at the 4-minute mile. When Bannister broke the 4-minute mile in 1954. Before that, it was this perceived limit that was impossible, right? We're thinking nobody can break a 4-minute mile, but then he did it, and then so many people followed after him. And so now the example you gave with the marathon, we're on course to break 2 hours in the marathon in the next 10 years. Which is ridiculous, right? It's it'd be less than a 4:35 per mile pace for a marathon, which is crazy, right? So again, it's this perceived limit of what we're capable of. So
I want to kind of push on you. There obviously has to be some physical limit of the human body, but what do you think it's going to take for us as humans to break that 2-hour barrier in the marathon?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of things going on. Obviously the conditions and, a lot of things, everything has to line up perfectly for something like that to happen, right? First of all, those are things that for the most part, you really can't control. There are some things that you can control though. I mentioned my interest is really around optimizing human performance, call it biohacking or, just the desire to be our absolute best versions of ourselves, whatever you want to call it. But I think there are a lot of ways that we can use information and technology to be able to give us that dashboard, so to speak, into our bodies and what's going on. So we know if we're pushing ourselves too hard or if we need to back off in order to optimize our performance and hit that goal time.
What are some technologies that you can think of that you think are helping us rethink our physical limits?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a ton of stuff out there. I was a part of this event, the 431 project, a couple of years ago, and we had this speaker by the name of Ben Greenfield, who does a lot of this biohacking stuff. And he's basically he's tried everything that's out there that has to do with optimizing human performance. But I guess the one or two things that stand out that I've kind of interacted with and that I know well. So I use a Garmin, and there's the data that comes with that. That's been pretty critical and useful in my training. And then there are a lot of other technologies that are still, I would say, being developed that aren't quite mature. And part of that is that you see in like all the wearables right now, it's moving from the sort of consumer focus to more clinical or medical grade wearable data. So it's becoming a lot more accurate. And I think accuracy is a big part of it. To throw out a couple of solutions that I've seen, I'm working with the Humon team. They're developing a wearable sensor that is looking at how efficiently your muscles are using oxygen. It's essentially a wearable that you wear on your thigh that uses infrared light to measure the oxygen saturation on your hemoglobin as your blood is flowing through your muscles. So that's one technology that can help to optimize your speed workouts in particular. So as you're running and you're putting in a hard effort, you're approaching what, I guess, to put it as simply as runners would understand, just hitting the wall. Everybody knows that feeling, right? Where the lactic acid has built up in your muscles to the point where you hit the wall. And so it's measuring how closely we're getting to that point, but not crossing that point. So that's one technology. Another one is coming out of the Harvard Innovation Lab. It's called Whoop, and it's focused more on recovery. And, initially, like when I was running cross country back in college, I knew recovery was important, but like you're pushing yourself to the limits and you don't necessarily prioritize sleep. So Whoop is a way to, it gives you more insights into how well your body is recovering between workouts and efforts. So it's looking at things like not only heart rate and temperature and sleep, but also heart rate variability. And heart rate variability, I've been doing a little experimenting with that. And that's a good way to really see how your body is responding to your workouts and whether or not you're recovering. So those are just a couple of examples of technologies that are being developed. Again, I wouldn't say they're prime time, but they're still in the development stages and are offering a lot of promise for what we can look forward to as athletes and things that we can use to optimize performance.
And personally, I love playing devil's advocate, and I love data. But I truly only believe that it's valuable if you can make meaningful insights or actionable plans from these data points. Then when I look at running, I think of it as a very pure and almost freeing time for people. So I'm curious, how do you personally think about the balance between what I might refer to as running naked, without any device, without any data, and just running for the love of it? On the other hand, running with a number of sensors and these data points coming in. Where do you see the balance between that personally?
Yeah, so I definitely identify with running naked, both in the literal sense and also
hey, let's keep this PG, okay, Chris?
Okay. No, I definitely identify with running without sensors. And I guess what I would say to that is I'm just taking my Garmin, for example. So I've gotten to the point where initially I was always looking at it and I was always like wanting to hit my splits. If I was running slower than, a certain pace, I would just kind of obsess over it. But now I'm to the point where I've trained myself. It's more about recording that I did the workout. So, I've turned off the mile notifications and it's just there kind of sitting in the background. And running for me, a lot of times when I'm going out for like a long run or an easy run, it's more about reconnecting with myself. And it's there more just to record the workout. And so I have my Garmin data that plugs into Strava, and that's where the community aspect comes in for me is at the top, they have this new feature they rolled out over this last year that has a calendar, and it has a dot on each day, basically reflective of the time you put in that day. But I guess for me, it was kind of an accountability thing where everybody sees everybody else's Strava, depending on your settings and so forth. But I have mine open in public, and it was just a way to kind of hold me accountable to like get my ass out the door, so to speak. So jumping back to the question of, do I run naked? Yeah, I mean, I only use the data as much as I need it, more so for interval workouts and hard workouts. And the rest of the time, it's kind of sitting in the background. I just use it more for this community aspect and plugging into the Strava platform.
So you definitely have a balance and specific uses for the data, correct?
Absolutely. And you hit on another really good point too, in that, with all of the connected devices and solutions out there right now, like it's the trend is only going to get worse, right? In terms of the data output, the terabytes and terabytes of data that we're getting from all these devices. And you hit on a good point in that it's useless unless you can draw actionable and meaningful insights from this data. So I think that's going to be an equally and even harder aspect of all of this, is that we're going to have software and intelligence that kind of sits on top of this data to help us interpret it and for it to make sense. I'm really passionate about connected health solutions that drive behavior change, and that's a key part of it. It's not about the data. It's how you present the data in a way that drives people to make meaningful changes in their lives.
I just want to take a quick moment and tell our listeners about our amazing sponsor, Goodr. Goodr started with the belief that running is fun and that your gear should be too. Their goal was to create the best pair of running sunglasses for under $30. And they did it. No slip, no bounce, polarized, all at a great price. Goodr designed their sunglasses to look gooder and stay comfortably on your face whether you're hauling down a mountain trail or drinking beers in a Mexican cantina. Check them out at playgoodr.com and be sure to use the Runified discount code, which you can find in the episode description. Not only will this save you money on a pair of Goodr sunglasses, but it will also help support what we are doing here at Runified. So I know one thing, we have been around this model of sick care, caring for people with, medical interventions when people are sick. But there's been the talk of more, let's actually get it back to healthcare and more preventative measures and keeping people out of the hospitals in the first place. When you think about this in terms of using these data points or using technology or connected health or community in any way in a virtual sense using software, how do you see, us moving forward actually being able to prevent diseases rather than just looking at trying to find ways of curing them?
Yeah, it's a very good question, and a very good point you bring up too. I think it's like 75% of our healthcare costs are driven primarily by chronic diseases. A lot of those, for the most part, are preventable. Things like heart disease, diabetes. We've become just a sedentary society. With that, we need new tools to be able to engage people in their own health again. You think of your 401k and how people are constantly checking it, right? I think we need a similar dashboard and incentive that's set up around people's own health. So, there are a ton of solutions out there right now for digital health startups. That's another area that I'm really passionate about. But I think the really good solutions are the ones that fit seamlessly into people's lives. So it fits on top of something that somebody's already doing. And it's also engaging in a way. So again, it's not just presenting a bunch of data, it's providing those actionable insights that are going to engage a person. So that's the last piece. There has to be some kind of community or reason for somebody to want to get engaged, in a way that's meaningful for their own health. An example of a company that is just getting started. So there are probably over 400, 500 or more startups that are focused in the connected health, digital health arena that are focusing on all aspects of healthcare and solving this problem, right? One company that I looked at recently that really stands out to me that hits on those aspects that I was mentioning that, fits seamlessly into the background of what they're already doing and engages them in a meaningful way. The company is called HealthRhythms. It was just announced this last spring. It's based out of the Cambridge Innovation Center here in the Boston area. Essentially what they do is they plug into the background of your daily activities, and they do that in a way where they're using artificial intelligence. They use various inputs. So it's a mental health app, first of all. And one of those inputs is how far this person is traveling and if those travel patterns change. So it's not looking at whether I traveled downtown to uptown or, in New York or wherever it is. It's not looking at specific locations. It's looking at actual distance. Like I traveled 1.5 miles today versus I usually travel 5 miles or something like that. So that's one piece. It's also looking at, again, anonymized. So it's not looking at specific messages, but are you texting or emailing less frequently? So these are all data inputs from your smartphone. So these are things that are already happening. So it's not, an app and a form that you have to fill out or, something additional you have to do. This fits on top of what you already do. So it's using this data and it's pulling it into its algorithm, and it's able to say, for instance, whether or not, a person who's at risk for depression, whether or not there needs to be an intervention. Are they slipping, or do they need engagement from their care team or their loved ones around them? So in that instance where it's flagging that person saying, hey, this is abnormal for this person, they're less active and they're kind of withdrawing. So it's able to then flag, depending on how you set it up, could just be a family member saying, hey, you need to reach out to this person, or you might want to reach out to this person. It's a really interesting, one example of an interesting digital health company that's tackling mental health, which is a huge problem.
So, we've talked a lot about connected health, and I like the example of, the Garmin feeding into the Strava, and you also have that virtual community around it. And in terms of our community here with Runified, I always like to ask our guests, what is one piece of, running advice specifically that you would like to share with them?
Yeah, there are a lot of nuggets that I could leave, but I think the one that stands out the most and that I'll leave you guys with is always finish what you start. I've signed up for a lot of crazy races in my day. Some of them, like in a 140.6 mile race, it lasts all day. It lasts 10 hours. And by the end, there were a couple times where, I get halfway through the marathon and, I'm like, this is it. Or actually many times throughout the day when that happens, but it's all about, again, like pushing through those mental barriers. But even when, physically, like I'm spent and, whether my nutrition is off or just having a bad day, I still always finish what you start. I'll just leave it at that.
Well, great. And, before I let you go, Chris, the one set of questions I haven't asked you yet is the lightning round questions. Do you mind if we go through these quick?
Let's do it.
Awesome. Well, first question, what is your favorite way to cross-train?
Well, I'm a triathlete, so swimming.
That's not fair. Second question, do you run with music or without music?
Well, I would say without music, unless I'm on the track. And if you've ever been to Boston, you know that the drivers here are a little cavalierish, and some of the bikers by default. And so you constantly have to be on your guard.
Thanks for that safety tip. What is your favorite race distance?
Yeah, well, actually, a triathlon, the half distance, the half iron distance, the 70.3. So I guess by default, the half marathon.
And what do you normally think about when you're out for a long run?
When I'm out for a long run, it's usually the mind space for me. It's reconnecting with myself mentally and also with my body.
What is the favorite race you have done so far?
Reached the beach in New Hampshire. I've done it 5 years. And again, it's all about connecting with some of my closest friends. It's a great way to do that. And one of the funnest races I've done.
Awesome. What is your favorite cheat meal or treat you give yourself after a hard race or workout?
Well, I don't cheat. I eat whatever I want. But my favorite food, as far as treats go, iced gingerbread Cliff Bars for sure.
I don't consider that a treat. Come on. And last lightning round question. What is your running motto?
I already kind of touched on this. Always finish what you start.
Love it. As we wrap this conversation up, what is one thing, it doesn't have to be about running, that you want the Runified community to take away from our conversation today?
I would say use running as a way to connect with the people in your life and to not ever take them for granted. Really it's about living every day, every hour, every minute in the moment as if it'll be your last. And, we all have this limited amount of time in this life to impact others in our life and the world around us. And so don't waste it doing something that you're not passionate about. Find what really excites you. It's really that passion that lights the fire in your belly, and go all in chasing after it. And then finally, just use running as a way to ground yourself, to reconnect with yourself and the others in your life. Running has brought me the closest to the people I care about the most. And it's really been a way to draw meaning from circumstances in life that stretch far beyond me in making any sense. And, things are going to happen, circumstances will change, but the one constant in all this has been just how I choose to respond and adapt. And we are in control of ourselves. And the perspective that we take on things. And so, keep that in perspective, and that's it.
Well, Chris, thanks so much for, spending the time with us. Is there any way our listeners can either keep up with you or connect with you?
Yeah, absolutely. If they go to my website, chrislsanders.com, I have links there for my Strava, Athlinks, Insta right there on the landing page, and they can connect.
Well, great. And I'll definitely put a link to that in the show notes so people can see that. Thank you so much for your times, and I really hope that our listeners are able to take something away from our conversation together today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and look forward to seeing you out here in Boston in April for the marathon.
Wow, you remind me I have to start training. Well, great, Chris. Have a great night, and best of luck in your race tomorrow.
Thanks, Matt.
Runified listeners, thanks for listening to our conversation with Chris Sanders. Personally, I love how he continually pushes his mind and body to go farther and faster. One topic we talked about, connected health and running gadgets and applications, is a very hot area that I believe deserves time on our podcast. Where I really see the connection is how technology is enabling people to not only learn more about their own bodies, but also where technology unlocks capabilities of connecting with other runners. This can serve as an encouragement for people, but also a source of virtual accountability, something we often look for. If you're new to our podcast and community, be sure to check out our website. One of the things we have there are some featured running-related products that are Runified approved. Also, be sure to listen to past episodes, such as episode 23, where we challenge the running community to be a part of bringing America back together in very tangible ways using running. Please feel free to reach out to us, as we always love interacting with the running community. Runified listeners, thanks again for listening to this episode, which was sponsored by Gooder. Be sure to check out this episode's description for a discount code towards some awesome sunglasses and to learn more about our guest. If you like what you heard, please subscribe to our podcast and sign up for our e-newsletter, which you can find on our website, runified.co. Till next time, make sure you stay runified.